So during my recent review of the new Fortis Marinemaster, a commentator left a really great comment. If you missed that important new watch and the review of it, do check it out. Now the comment was rather long, but it raises some really great points, so I will break it down to a few key questions to address in this video. Now firstly, let's be a little uncouth and talk value. A new Fortis Marinemaster M44 costs $4,150 at retail, while a Tudor, like the Black Bay 58 here, with basically the same movement, costs less at $3,800 retail. The Pelagos, which is superior to both watches in its specifications, costs around the same as the Marinemaster. So why do I consider the Fortis good value? Why is it priced more than the Tudor? And is Tudor still the best when it comes to prestigious Swiss-made divers under $5,000? So this week I borrowed a Pelagos and a Black Bay to find out. Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. And as we're talking divers from Tudor, I thought for my wristwatch check, well, of course, I had to wear my vintage Submariner there. Typically I wear it on the Oyster bracelet, but today I have to say I'm really enjoying it on just a plain olive, no fuss strap from, this is the NATO strap from Wrist Candy Watch Club. There's just something so tooltastically compelling about this combo. I don't know what it is, although it doesn't really fit my outfit, but oh well, there we go. Now, all the watches today have been reviewed quite extensively in previous videos, so have a look back if you want to know more about their specifications, their evolution, history, positives, negatives, all the rest of it, so do have a look back. Don't forget to hit like, it really helps the channel. If you want to see more free, unsponsored, independent content like this. First, we must understand why Tudor are possibly the best in their price range in 2022 and held in such high regard that they automatically become the standard to be compared to whenever there's a new kid on the block challenging its dominance. There's no doubt that the power of the bigger brother brand Rolex rubs off heavily on the Tudor. Rolex, after all, is the world's most recognizable, lusted after, innovative luxury brand beyond watches even. If you love them or loathe them, there's no denying its list of world firsts, influence on horology, pop culture, and appreciation in value is extremely difficult to beat. Most crucially, this influence is on a technical level beyond the mere look and design of it. The mastery of watchmaking has been directly incorporated into the proprietary made chronometer level movements we see in these contemporary Tudors. The traversing bridge fixed at both sides improves resistance to shocks and vibration, along with the free-sprung microstellar adjustable balance, which also contains silicon hairspring technology. These are all traits of Rolex movement design, a culmination of almost a century of proven experience that has resulted in some of the best, most robust, accurate, and therefore most reliable movements in production. Naturally, all that experience and know-how was passed on to Rolex's younger sibling, as perfectly demonstrated here by my vintage Tudor Submariner from the early 90s. Tudor's movement manufacturer Kanaisi was first started in 2015 in order to supply their own watches. But in order to justify that massive investment, they also supply many other watch brands like Chanel, Breitling, Norquin, and of course Fortis, among others. This is very normal in the watch world. This even happens at the haute horology level, although many times surreptitiously and kept deliberately from the public. But I can personally attest to this, seeing it myself on many watch factory tours in Switzerland. Tudor and Fortis both have a very long, storied, rich, award-winning, even illustrious history behind each brand. How does this affect the value? Tudor divers have a long history of military involvement, being officially issued more times than Rolex subs in quantity, most famously to the French Marine Nationale, but first it was actually the US Navy. Fortis has a long tradition of making purpose-built and tested watches for space that goes back all the way to the 1960s, along with their Fliegers being issued to dozens of elite Air Force squadrons around the world. But perhaps most important, they were the first brand to mass-produce the very first automatic watch in collaboration with British horologist John Harwood in the 1920s. A brand's history is a very difficult thing to quantify in terms of value, as obviously it's not a tangible thing, like for example the movements we discussed earlier and their prowess, specifications and performance-wise. However, it certainly does have a strong effect, but at the end of the day it all depends on the priorities and tastes of the buyer, and if these associated achievements or stories mean something. Out of the many watch factories I visited in Switzerland, Fortis was one of my favourites. There's something very special, almost the spark of magic you feel when you walk into the factory, the same place where the first automatic watches were developed before anywhere else in the world. Seeing actual pieces that went into space and were worn by astronauts in their museum, which consequently inspired my own purchase of my vintage Fortis. It felt really authentic, and that personal connection automatically means I value it more than Tudor, which is a bit more mainstream. But don't get me wrong, you guys know I love Tudor too. But you see where I'm going with this? For you, it could be completely the other way around. You might have had an experience with a Tudor or something in their identity, history or achievements that just really connects with you, and so as a result you value it more. I'm also a bit of a history nerd, so naturally I gravitate towards Fortis more. I also like the fact that Fortis is a lesser well-known brand. This explains why the person who left the comment that inspired this video questioned why I think Fortis is, and I quote, for the true watch collector in the know. While Tudor are not exactly mainstream like an Apple Watch, I do see their billboards on highways, and much to the annoyance of the die-hard Tudor purists, they employ world-famous brand ambassadors like Lady Gaga and David Beckham.
Because you are born to do that. You are born to dare.
I still, to this day, get comments on my old Fortis review videos of people just getting into watches not familiar with the brand and expressing their thanks as they went on to get one of their own. There's a real appreciation there of me raising awareness of these lesser-known brands, especially one with such a great, strong, independent history. Now, the next aspect we must take into consideration is the simple economics of it all. Tudor has the financial powerhouse of Rolex, as well as its vast infrastructure behind it. Not only that, it's available as a result in stores the world over. If we compare the amount of employees Tudor has, it's 5 times as much as Fortis. So you start to understand, you know, the size difference, and this directly affects the final price. In 2015, Tudor produced around 200,000 watches that year. It is unclear how many they produced this year. As for Fortis, it's also unknown, but I highly doubt it's in the 6 figures. Tudor can take advantage of the Rolex logistical international network, everything from transportation to access to key and influential people, resources, related industry insiders, and of course the watch journalists and stores. Fortis, on the other hand, is a far smaller operation. Its overheads on everything from wages, costs of materials, transportation fees, taxes, marketing budgets, legal fees, research, development, testing, everything down to the price of coffee in their office, and anything else you can possibly imagine, in comparison is going to be higher as a result. This is why, economically speaking alone, I do still consider them good value for money, despite the slightly higher price. Simply put, it's cheaper for Tudor to produce, considering everything they have at their disposal. Unfortunately, we live in a society where it seems people are more self-entitled than ever before. Just look at the comments of any watch video and you'll see the watch snobs anonymously, you know, being negative, whining, complaining, or the armchair watchmakers who really don't have any experience at all but like to give it all of that. Going off on a tangent, but what I'm trying to say is you don't see the hard work, the dedication, the fortitude, the blood, sweat and tears and effort. Imagine the time and effort and the cost that goes into developing a watch, especially from scratch. In a recent video of Watch Talk with my good friend Mark, I expressed how very few YouTubers, if any, aside from me and Mark and possibly a few others, are truly qualified when it comes to talking about value in watches. Now, I am not the know-all and be-all of watches. I'm merely an enthusiast learning like everybody watching this video. But aside from visiting and seeing firsthand watch production from start to finish, and every step required in doing so, in 7 of the biggest, most important watch brands in watchmaking, me and Mark also have been involved in design and manufacturing of watches. While Mark has his own Islander brand, I myself have co-designed 6 watches with various other brands. For some of them it was just a simple tweak and not very complicated, and others took absolutely years to get right and endless prototypes. The intricacies, experience and tribulations in the development process needed to create a watch from a simple sketch to the finished product is almost bewildering to comprehend or understand if you've never done it yourself. So this is why I say Fortis is good value, and trust me, I know what I'm talking about here. The next thing to consider here is aesthetics. The Marinemaster is a brand new rejuvenation and 6th generation of a line of watches that has been very inconsistent in their design language, despite this latest collection being perhaps the strongest yet in my opinion. Tudor has a far more homogeneous aesthetic that obviously started with the typical Submariner stylings and then evolved into something more of its own thing with the Submariner references 716 and 721 in 1969 that first introduced the now iconic snowflake hands and square marker dial. Despite this dramatic departure from the classic Rolex aesthetic, they obviously continued to offer the traditional look until 1999, like my own 90s reference 79090. Unlike the Fortis Marinemaster and its 2021 modern descendant, you can see the lineage more clearly in the Tudor modern divers that go all the way back to the first Tudor Submariner in 1954, which, let's not forget, is a year later than the first Rolex Submariner. A history that shadowed Rolex all the way up to these contemporary offerings. And let's not forget that the Rolex Submariner, you know, as ubiquitous as they are, is still the most iconic dive watch of all time. What watch brand wouldn't want to have that influence? And legitimately too, this is not a homage. I mean, or this isn't either. How many divers under $5,000 can boast this legacy? Tudor did something very clever with splitting its divers into essentially 2 new families of Submariner successors in 2012. The rapidly ever-expanding Black Bay collection is diving capable, vintage inspired in looks, and far more of an everyday luxury piece that has that inherent Bondian any situation versatility. Come to think of it, maybe Bond should have worn a Tudor. Let me know what you think in the comments. While the Pelagos is strictly down to business, a modern tool watch, more for the serious professional diver. This is a logical move and it keeps everybody happy. It's very difficult to be both. The Pelagos is specialized with its larger size to increase legibility, fully loomed bezel, higher 500-meter depth rating, helium escape valve, the stark, entirely brushed finish, in titanium no less, to make it lighter, and the fact that it was the first to receive Tudor's new in-house movement at the time are all clear indications of this specialization. The recent addition of the FXD and its integrated spring bars are further proof of this, much to the annoyance of watch fans who simply don't understand the military tradition or function of permanent spring bars. So this has all really worked well together for Tudor and certainly has strengthened their dominance in this price range, especially when you consider, you know, the Rolex equivalent is becoming out of reach of many price-wise, and also it's a little bit ludicrous, let's be honest. I mean, that's why I buy used Rolex Submariners. I don't think I'd ever buy one new unless it was some special occasion or I just had money to burn, right? Actually, even if I did have money to burn, that's not my style, but not to mention the lack of availability. In many ways, Fortis is kind of what Tudor used to be, if Tudor is now what Rolex used to be. So you see where I'm going with that? And you know what? It makes me realize how clever Hans Wilsdorf was by founding Tudor as a kind of secondary option. It's a wonderful strategy, and I only have more admiration for Hans Wilsdorf as the days pass. Is Tudor still the king at under $5,000 for a Swiss-made automatic diver in 2022? Absolutely, in my opinion, especially as their biggest rival Omega, with their master chronometer Seamasters, have now been repositioned with higher prices from between $5,000 to $10,000 at retail, very much to fill the void left by their nemesis Rolex. That only leaves entry-level luxury like Breitling, Oris, Marathon, Tag Heuer, Longines and so on, or vintage alternatives, and of course niche Swiss diver specialists like Doxa and Squale. And whether you like Tudor or not, there's no denying that in terms of specifications, quality, price, heritage, and brand prestige, Tudor pretty much rules here. But at the end of the day, like anything in life, it's always down to personal preference. That really determines how much you value something. It's always what people are willing to pay for something. Is it going to last forever? Well, I can emphatically say no, in my opinion. It's already going the way of Rolex. I mean, will Tudor be Rolex in 50 years or 10 years, or perhaps they are already? I mean, let me know what you think down in the comments. It's the natural order of things, inflation, etc. But actually this is even more than inflation, because if I look at my vintage Tudor here, and I hate talking about value because it's a little bit vulgar to concentrate on that all the time, but this is the topic of today's video. It's doubled in price in less than 3 years, or almost doubled. Crazy. In a way it's a good thing because it stops me from selling it and buying it again, because I simply would not pay that for an ETA-based Tudor sub. Anyway, that's another discussion entirely. So before I go, I've got to say a massive thank you to Moya for sending these in so quickly. It was a last minute thing. As you guys know, I buy and sell from them personally all the time, so I can highly recommend them. They are one of the most professional watch dealers and authorized dealer for many, many brands. Let me know your thoughts, queries, comments, opinions, all the rest of it down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and found it useful, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, thank you for watching. Ciao.